Hi, my name is Angela, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to prepare for residency when you're on clinical rotations in pharmacy school. I am a pharmacy student about to become pharmacist, and I'm doing these videos just to have kind of weekly chats about things I feel would be helpful for those interested in pharmacy or interested in residency training. And in the last video I went over just general clinical rotation advice and how to be successful on rotations. And in this video I'll be going over residency considerations because I am going to be a resident here in just about a month, and I had to go through residency prep and interviews and all of those application processes while I was also on rotation. So I just want to talk about how maybe you could best do that when you're on rotation so that you can get the best experience but also prepare for residency. So we talked about preceptors in the last video and how you should be going to them with your goals and your interest in the field of pharmacy. So you should definitely let your preceptors know, day one or within the first couple orientation days that you're interested in residency so that you can build that into your schedule at some point. You also want to identify preceptors that you have who could be positive letter writers for you. You would want to try and get those people to be your earlier rotations, right after you get out of P3 year. So hopefully June, July, August, September, those kind of months, anytime before or at November really, so that by December you have your letter writers and you can get them notified of the programs you're applying to and have them start sending their letters into forecasts. But you want to identify preceptors who can write you positive and strong letters of recommendation. It's very important to say those two words when you're asking a preceptor, will you write me a letter? Will it be positive, and will it be something that's a strong recommendation that will make me competitive for programs? Because if you don't ask those two questions, it's very possible that you could get a negative letter and something that could really hurt your application. Honestly, from what I've heard, your CV and your letters of rec are two very important things which determine whether you're asked for an interview or not. So they definitely are an important part of the process, and you should make sure you select the right people. So I asked every single one of my preceptors, and I didn't use all of them. I just used about 4 or 5, and I used about 3 people for every single one for most of them. And you would want to get people, each residency program you apply to will have the requirements. So some will want just clinical preceptors that you've had, or they'll want someone from your job, or they'll want someone from your academics, or a mix. So I had mainly my employer as a letter writer, and then 2 of my clinical rotations, I had 2 preceptors write me letters. And then in one program, they had me do an academia person, and then in another, I just chose to do a different preceptor that I felt really fit the program I was applying to. So really, it could vary a little bit, but honestly, you're probably gonna have about 3 people who write you most of your letters of rec. And you want to have backups again if one of those people fall through and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm really busy, or something happened, I can't write your letter anymore. You want to have backups, people who have said yes in the past to you. And what I did was notify all those other people who said yes, but I didn't need the letter. I just said, thank you, I appreciate you offering, but I don't need your letter anymore. And that's really all it took, and no problems there. But they really need to be preceptors who can speak to your clinical abilities. And depending on what program you're applying to, you'd probably want to match that up with your program. So because I'm very AmCare focused, I had one of my ambulatory care preceptors speak about my clinical experience in that area. And so similarly, if you're going into a community residency, you might want to have your community pharmacist that you've had a rotation with write you a letter. Things to think about, but definitely someone who can speak to your clinical abilities. And yeah, during the rotation that you have with them, just ask them if you can even just take an hour one afternoon or one day just to talk to them about their residency experience. If they're at a big academic medical center, likely they will have a lot of experience, so it'd be very beneficial for you as a student to take advantage of that. They probably have seen a lot of different students go through this process and just can give you some tips and advice. So I found that to be one of the best conversations I had with all of my preceptors, just asking them about if they've gone to residency, what they thought about it and what they would do differently, and then what they've seen other students do and if they've been successful or not. And then as you're going through your rotational year, you're going to get emails hopefully from ASHP if you're a member, because they will automatically send you updates on mid-year, on residency prep, even podcasts, online articles of how this year things are maybe different. I went through the process during the COVID time, so everything was virtual, and it was very important to get those updates and get that additional information so that I could make sure I was doing things properly since it was a different year. I did go to midyear and it was virtual, and I would say it was a great experience. It was exhausting, and I can only imagine how exhausting it would have been actually in person. But if you're someone who is considering residency, I would really strongly consider to go to ASHP's midyear and register for that, because it's going to give you the chance to have interactions one-on-one with the programs. And in those virtual settings, I usually was in a large discussion room and could ask questions, and in a couple others, I would say about half of the programs I visited or visited their booths virtually, I was able to talk one-on-one with someone for about 10 minutes each, which was great. So get that FaceTime with the program, show them that you're interested, and also get some of your questions answered so you know if you really want to apply there. And then one thing to think about that is kind of more geared towards residency, but also could be just seen as a general clinical rotation advice. You're going to be going along and documenting in your CV what you're doing that's clinical or special, such as, oh, I did a project on a journal club for this certain topic, or I did these patient care experiences or these interprofessional experiences. And those are all good, and that's what you should put in your CV when you apply. But you also should keep track of like your patient care experiences, or just even your general experiences that you could speak to in interviews or in your letters of intent. So in your letters of intent, when you're applying, you're going to talk about your passions and what you're interested in, what your goals are for your career, and why the program is a good fit for you. And if you have experiences that you've reflected on and documented all kind of together, you can just really easily draft that letter of intent with all of that content. And when you're hopefully going through residency interviews, you're going to be prepping for interview questions, which I'll do in a lot of other videos, because honestly, interview prep is pretty extensive and I want to just go through that more in depth later. But you're going to get a lot of example situational questions, such as, tell me about a time when a coworker did something and you guys got in a conflict and how did you resolve it? Or you had a difficult patient, or you had a great patient experience, what was that like? So if you're going through rotations and you're making a document, you know, of these meaningful, impactful events, you have them all listed out, and then once you get to that time in the residency process, in your interviews or in your letter of intent, you can just start pulling the best ones, or the ones that fit to the program you're applying to. Again, I had a lot of AmCare interests, so those AmCare experiences were great to have. And I didn't do this, but I heard another student give this advice, and I just thought it was great. It would have been very helpful to just have those all written out. It would have made the interview process really quick, and I think it would have made my letters of intent a lot stronger. So big piece of advice. And so just kind of the timeline, June, July, August, when you first start rotations, you should just be asking your preceptors for letters, starting to document those rotations, updating your CV, and maybe start looking at programs on ASHP's search engine, which I did in another video. And then in September, you're going to want to kind of narrow your list down and try to make sure you have a reasonable amount of programs that you're looking at. Then in October, you'll probably register for the midyear if you're going to that, and start planning housing and all those, planning on flights and all those other details for the event, and if other students are going that you'll go with. In November, you're going to register for the NMS National Matching Service and Forecast, which I mentioned in past videos, and start completing your profile. Try to get some of those elements added in so that when application time comes, you're not in crunch mode trying to get that all figured out. It's good to get that figured out ahead of time. Also within all of these months, honestly, from probably August to November, programs that you're interested in may have their own online information sessions, which I would very highly recommend to attend. It kind of gets exhausting just constantly attending those. At least with COVID, it was a little bit of like that Zoom burnout effect where we just were on virtual meetings all the time. But it was really good because those programs could see you and you could ask questions that maybe at midyear you couldn't ask those one-on-one, and they know that you're extra interested in their program if you're attending these outside events, and so that's a good flag to them that you really are someone who is interested in their program. They might look at you a little closer. But in November, you'll start to finalize your CV, because hopefully in December you'll have that month off and you can just finalize what you did in the past months. In November, I started drafting my letter of intent, a kind of a general one, and then I would tweak it for other programs. But again, what I was passionate about, what I wanted to go into, the programs I really knew I wanted to apply to, I started just drafting those, because I ended up applying to 16 programs, so that ended up being quite a lot of letters of intent. So definitely getting those earlier on would have been great. But I started in November, and then in November I started notifying my preceptors of their letters. So I'll just pause here and we'll go in next week for continuation of this discussion. But if you have questions, post them below and share this if you think it'd be helpful for someone else, and I'll see you guys next week.